as many of you know, part of the new Elevate is that we are following along a book. And the book that we are following along right now is The Alchemist. I don't even have to do this because it's on the screen right there. But for those people online, if you're tuning in and you don't have a slide, and this is week 4, and we are going through this book so much more slowly than I had anticipated, but there's just so much. It is chock-a-block of these incredibly universal and relatable themes and ideas and concepts and experiences. And so even if you are not a 19-year-old boy who happens to be a shepherd living in Spain, who is now traveled to Morocco and may or may not be on his way to some other part in Africa, then there are still things that he is going through, that he is thinking about, that he is feeling and experiencing, that most, if not all of us, can relate to in some way. And so last week, where did we leave off? Last week we left off, and as with the entire part 1 so far, Santiago, who's just called the boy for most of the part, is really going back and forth between, does he follow this incredible adventure that is looming on the horizon, that has been informed by this mysterious dream that he had, or is that too weird and too bizarre and too new with too many unknowns, and does he stick with what he knows and stays as a shepherd with his sheep? Well, we know that he's already given up his sheep, okay? He's already gave them, he sold them to a friend who was super excited. He gave 6 of them as a down payment to the old king because he was helping him to find out where his treasure was in Egypt. And he keeps going back to this conversation that he had with this old king in this village square where he learned so much. And the biggest thing was that there's so much more to life than he imagined before that. He thought he had his whole life planned out, and then he had this dream, he met this gypsy woman, he met this king, and all of this stuff, right? So in this section that we're going through today, we're introduced to yet another character who has an impact on the boy, and he on this character. And this character is the crystal merchant. The crystal merchant awoke with the day and felt the same anxiety that he felt every morning. He had been in the same place for 30 years, a shop at the top of a hilly street where few customers passed. Now it was too late to change anything. The only thing he had ever learned to do was buy and sell crystal glassware. There had been a time when many people knew of his shop. Arab merchants, French and English geologists, German soldiers who were always well-heeled. In those days, it had been wonderful to be selling crystal, and he had thought how he would become rich and have beautiful women at his side as he grew older. But as time passed, Tangier had changed. The nearby city of Ceuta had grown faster than Tangier, and business had fallen off. Neighbors moved away, and there remained only a few small shops on the hill. And no one was going to climb the hill just to browse through a few small shops. But the crystal merchant had no choice. He had lived 30 years of his life buying and selling crystal pieces, and now it was too late to do anything else. What a downer, right? Come on. Like this guy, no matter what he sort of seems like, he already believes his best days are behind him. Okay, he has lived his life the way that it was supposed to be lived, and now he's just doomed to fate, right? Which at the very beginning of the book, part of the world's greatest lie, right? That we don't have agency, that we don't have the choice in how we experience or create life. And so he's looking around his shop, and there aren't too many people coming by. A couple of hours pass, and then just before he's going to lunch, he sees this young Arab boy peeking in through the windows. And because he's been doing this for 30 years, he can tell that the boy doesn't have any money to spend, so he's probably not going to buy anything. But he's like, I'm just going to wait a few minutes before I go to lunch. A card hanging in the doorway announced that several languages were spoken in the shop. The boy saw a man appear behind the counter. I can clean those glasses in the window if you want, said the boy. The way they look now, nobody is going to want to buy them. The man looked at him without responding. In exchange, you could give me something to eat. The man still said nothing, and the boy sensed that he was going to have to make a decision. In his pouch, he had his jacket. He certainly wasn't going to need it in the desert. Taking the jacket out, he began to clean the glasses. In half an hour, he had cleaned all the glasses in the window, and as he was doing so, 2 customers had entered the shop and bought some crystal. When he had completed the cleaning, he asked the man for something to eat. "Let's go and have some lunch," said the crystal merchant. He put a sign on the door, and they went to a small cafe nearby. As they sat down at the only table in the place, the crystal merchant laughed. "You didn't have to do any cleaning," he said. "The Quran requires me to feed a hungry person." "Well, then why did you let me do it?" the boy asked. "Because the crystal was dirty, and both you and I needed to cleanse our minds of negative thoughts." That is one of my favorite lines in the book. Every single time I hear that line, I'm like, whoa. And it's just such a great example of how we can be thinking things we're not even aware of, and then someone or something happens. Someone or something comes along, in this case the boy comes along, where the merchant is going along for 30 years. This is what life is like. My best days are behind me. It's not going to get any better. I can't change. But then the boy comes in, and he points out, just simply, naively, your glasses are dirty, let me clean them for you, and maybe in exchange you could give me something to eat. And just that little experience is enough for the merchant to have a little bit of a shift in perspective, right? Realizing that, maybe these thoughts I've been thinking, and maybe the way that I've been approaching life, maybe the way I've been receiving and embracing life, maybe it's not so positive. Maybe I could do with clearing my mind a little bit, right? And so they go to lunch, and they're sitting in the cafe, and the merchant is asking the boy, trying to see my notes here, the merchant is asking the boy why it is that he is there. Why is it that he's interested in maybe working for him? And so they keep talking, and then they start talking about omens, which is something that the boy had talked about with the king, and he's kind of excited because he realizes that, this old merchant guy, he knows about omens too, so maybe we can actually talk about some stuff. And so the merchant offers the boy a job, but wants to know, why do you want this job? And then the boy says, well, I need to make enough money so that I can get to Egypt tomorrow. And the merchant just kind of looks at him and goes, oh man, there's no way. Even if you worked in my shop every single day for an entire year, never mind all night long, but even if you worked for an entire year, you would still have to borrow money on top of that because Egypt is thousands of miles away. There was a moment of silence so profound that it seemed the city was asleep. No sound from the bazaars, no arguments among the merchants, no men climbing to the towers to chant. No hope, no adventure, no old kings or personal legends, no treasure, and no pyramids. It was as if the world had fallen silent because the boy's soul had. He sat there staring blankly through the door of the cafe, wishing that he had died and that everything would end forever at that moment. The merchant looked anxiously at the boy. All the joy he had seen that morning had suddenly disappeared. I can give you the money you need to get back to your country, my son, said the crystal merchant. The boy said nothing. He got up, adjusted his clothes, and picked up his pouch. I'll work for you, he said, and after another long silence, he added, I need money to buy some sheep. And so here, I have goosebumps. Here we are again. He's so excited, the boy, about this path that he is on. He's had all of these obstacles that he's overcome. Remember, last week, this guy stole all his money, right? They were walking through the bazaar, and then all of a sudden he realized the guy took off with all of his money. He had nothing left. But then there was the man, the candy maker, that gave him a little candy. And now he's come across this crystal merchant who's offering him a job. But this whole idea of, wow, it's not just one day that's going to make this happen. I would have to work at this for a year. It's too big. It's too daunting. The leap from here to there seems impossible. And so he gives up. He decides to give up and say, that's it. I'm just going to go back to what I know. This is too hard. This is too much. And this is such a great illustration or example or metaphor for how many times in our life have we had a dream? Have we had a vision? Have we really, really wanted to do something? Something that maybe we'd gone back and forth about a few times, but overall we're moving towards. And then all of a sudden there is a massive obstacle or challenge that comes into play, and you kind of go, I don't have it in me. I don't know how. I don't have the energy, I don't have the time, I don't have the money, I'm not smart enough, I don't have the resources. Like, there's no way, it's impossible. And then you let it go. Has that happened to anyone? All right, I see some hands going up. Okay, for those of you who haven't, wow, teach me. So that's how part 1 ends. And part 1 is about 25% of the book. And that first part 1 really is about awareness. It is about finding out that there is more to life than what the boy thought was there. It's about kind of going back and forth with there's this thing that is pulling him. Does he listen to it? Does he pay attention to it? And then when it gets really, really hard or challenging, oh, maybe it's better to go back to what I know. So he's constantly grappling between this is what is pulling me in new directions that are completely unknown, and this is what I know. Unfamiliar versus familiar. And now we are introduced to the crystal merchant who's going through his own kind of thing, his own grappling, because he has once had an amazing life that was super lucrative and thriving. And then because circumstances changed, he allowed those circumstances to impact his life. And now he's like, that's it. My best days are behind me. So we move into part 2. And part 2 is where the adventure begins to unfold in earnest. And so part 2 begins with the boy having worked for the crystal merchant for over a month. And they have a good relationship, and even though it's not the best job in the world, it's a good job, and the crystal merchant is a kind man, and so the boy doesn't mind working for him. And because the boy is resourceful, and because there's this enthusiasm in him that has come up again, he's thinking of all these ideas on how to sell more crystal and how to make the shop more lucrative, on how to thrive. And he's constantly asking the crystal merchant, hey, can I do this? Can I try this? Can we try this? And so one of the things that he wants to do is that he wants to build a display case for the crystal. We could place it outside and attract those people who pass at the bottom of the hill. I've never had one before, the merchant answered. People will pass by and bump into it, and pieces will be broken. Well, when I took my sheep through the fields, some of them might have died if we had come upon a snake, but that's the way life is with sheep and with shepherds. The merchant turned to a customer who wanted 3 crystal glasses. He was selling better than ever, as if time had turned back to the old days when the street had been one of Tangier's major attractions. Business has really improved, he said to the boy after the customer left. I'm doing much better, and soon you'll be able to return to your sheep. Why ask more out of life? Because we have to respond to omens. And so even though the crystal merchant, he's noticing, he's feeling the changes that are happening, these beliefs that he has, these stories that he's been telling, this life that he has been living is so ingrained in his being, even with all these new, exciting, enthusiastic changes that are coming about because of this boy, he still can't sort of like get into that wave of enthusiasm and continues to resign himself to it's just better to keep things the way that they are. And yet, there's something in him that is very attracted and pulled towards the boy. And because of this boy, he himself is unsettled and can't resign himself because this thing, which might be his personal legend or his purpose or his mission that he hasn't answered, is still coming forth in him. And so the merchant is thinking all of these things about, the boy being here has been so great, things are thriving and he's going to be able to do what he wants to do. And, then I'll be able to go back to my simple life. But he's thinking, the boy's very presence in the shop was an omen. And as time passed and money was pouring into the cash drawer, he had no regrets about having hired the boy. He ended up paying him a little more than he intended to because he didn't think the boy was going to do such a good job. But that's okay, because things were getting better, things were thriving, the store was becoming more lucrative, but really it was like he just wanted to keep the boy happy so that the boy could make his money and he could go back to his sheep. And then he asked the boy, why do you want to go to the pyramids anyway? And he says, because I've always heard about them. He was going to start telling him about the dream, but then he didn't. The treasure was now nothing but a painful memory, and he tried to avoid thinking about it. And the merchant's like, why would you want to go to these pyramids? They're just a pile of stones. Anybody can build one in your backyard. Well, I don't know about that, but he's thinking they're not as important as they might seem to be. And so the boy asked him, well, haven't you ever dreamt of traveling yourself? And he's like, I don't really like change, and to travel would mean to change things. And he's like, really, why do you want to work for me? Why do you want to work for me? He's like, why? Because I want to get to my sheep faster. We have to take advantage when luck is on our side and do as much to help it as it's doing to help us. Our quote from the meditation, right? And even though the boy is super enthusiastic and excited about going back to his sheep, he's still settling because he thinks that's what he's meant to do, because it's the easier thing to do, right? But when he thinks about the dream, when he thinks about the treasure, when he thinks about the pyramids, there wouldn't be any pain or regret or suffering there if there wasn't still something that was unanswered, that was unfinished there, right? So as they're talking and the merchant is telling him about why he wanted to travel, he starts getting very emotional, and he tells him about the 5 things that, according to the Quran, that every Muslim is supposed to do in their life. Their 5 obligations. One of them being to believe in the one true God. He lists off 3 more, and then he looks like tears are starting to fill his eyes, and the boy asks, well, what's the 5th thing? And he says that at least once in a lifetime that you're supposed to travel to Mecca. Mecca is a lot farther away than the pyramids. When I was young, all I wanted to do was put together enough money to start this shop. I thought someday I'd be rich and could go to Mecca. I began to make some money, but I could never bring myself to leave someone in charge of the shop. The crystals are delicate things. At the same time, people were passing by my shop all the time, heading for Mecca. Some of them were rich pilgrims traveling in caravans with servants and camels, but most of the people making the pilgrimage were poorer than I. Well, why don't you go to Mecca now? The boy asks, because he's got enough money, he can do it. Because it's the thought of Mecca that keeps me alive. That's what helps me face these days that are all the same, these mute crystals on the shelves and lunch and dinner at that same horrible cafe. I'm afraid that if my dream is realized, I'll have no reason to go on living. I just want to dream about Mecca. But I'm afraid that it would all be a disappointment if I went, so I prefer to just dream about it. That day, the merchant gave the boy permission to build his display. Not everyone can see his dreams come true in the same way. And so here we have the crystal merchant, who is inspired by the boy in some ways, but is so set in his own ways that he can't see the opportunity that is right in front of him. That all he would have to do is decide to go. He's got the means, he's got the resources, he knows that this is the 5th thing that is one of the big 5 obligations according to the Quran, and he's a very devout man. But he has decided at this point, because he has dreamt about it, he has visualized it, he has imagined it, every single little detail about that experience, that the real deal could never live up to what he has in his head. And so he's closed himself from the opportunity of going and experiencing the gazillions of possibilities that he could experience if he just went there himself. And so that's where we leave off with the crystal merchant and the boy. And so in the end, the whole purpose of this is to listen to your dreams, to pay attention to them, and not just to dream them, not just to leave them as these incredible ideas or wishes that are hoping or whatever, but to actually embrace them and embody them, no matter how challenging, no matter how hard. Because this is a call on your heart. This is a call on your soul. This is something that you wouldn't be dreaming about if in some quantum reality it didn't already exist. And so if there is any kind of sorrow or pain or regret or suffering or whatever that is coming up, it means that you are misaligned with this dream. And all you have to do is let go of whatever stories or thoughts or beliefs are getting in the way and allow yourself to be guided by that power, guided by that force, guided by intuition, guided by God, guided by whatever you want to call it, that is always, always within us, every single moment of every single day, that is simply waiting to be unleashed. And as we do, then we get into that flow, that alignment of life itself. That's when universe constantly has our back, and that's when the magic starts to happen. And it feels like every single step becomes easier, and even when there are challenges, all of a sudden, boom, as if by magic, the situation is solved. So the title of my talk today is Dream Big, Live Bigger. I don't know what this little girl is doing or what her dreams are, but her joy and enthusiasm for me was amazing, and that's why I chose this picture. It is so easy to get caught up in the same old of our lives. But just because we have thought something doesn't mean it's true. Just because we have a belief that we've believed for so long doesn't mean that it's the only belief that we can embrace. Just because we have told a story again and again and again doesn't mean we have to stick with that narrative. Every single moment we are at choice. We are at choice to think a new thought, to embrace a new belief, to tell a new story, to create a new life experience, and to embrace our dreams and not just dream them, but live them. So that is my invitation to us all, is to dream big and then live bigger. Thank you, and so it is.